My, how a week can change everything. Cleveland Browns fans seem to be losing themselves in the moment last week with that win over Baltimore, only to get snapped back to reality when they found out that if you live by Jameis passing the ball, you will surely die by Jameis passing the ball. Now the fans this week are watching our percentage of the playoff percentage dropping from 41.7 to a 3% chance. And now you can start hearing the chant slowly echo in the halls of the Huntington Bank Field Stadium of DTR, DTR. Hello, you're listening to the Bearded Browns podcast. I'm Angel, and you see Chad on your screen. The person you don't see tonight is Mike. He is out, and he has a really, really bad sinus infection, or he's just very angry that the Browns lost, and now they're not going to make the playoffs. Now I'm just playing. He's really sick. He's coughing, sneezing. He's got head pounding. So, keep him in your thoughts and prayers. But Mike is out with a bad sinus infection, and the state of the Browns is going to be the main topic of conversation tonight on this podcast. But first, please follow us on YouTube, subscribe, hit that bell button for notifications. Follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, Trends, whatever you seem to be on social with. I'm sure we're on. Please give us a follow. Also, a huge shout out to our sponsors and partners, C&B Excavating and Doug White from Allstate Insurance. Thank you for partnering with us and keeping this stream up and running, basically. But first, we're going to get into it, Chad. Are you ready for some good, the bad, and the ugly?
Yeah, I'm ready. We didn't know who was doing what.
Let's go with me. The good. I'll go first, and then you do the second, and then we'll kind of like both agree
And
with the.
I'll be Mike for the third.
Yeah, there you go. You could play the voice of Mike. The good is there are plenty of star veterans and young pieces still showing up on this team, right? So we can go through a list. You got Tillman, who seems to be trending up. You got even JOK, even before his injury. Miles still showed up. He's not giving up. He's still sacking quarterbacks. You got Reed, who no one really is talking about, had a pretty good game. I'm not sure if the PFF score pointed that out, but he had a pretty good game. Mike Hall Jr. seems to be stepping up. There are plenty of star veterans and young talent still playing for some pride. That is the good. What is the bad?
Yeah, so the bad is
like, where do I start?
After watching last week's game, coming back to an offense that had the inability to do anything positive pretty much the whole game, to me was the bad. And just globally, as the whole team looking at it this game and not knowing what we're going to see going forward, to me the bad is whether it's all the interceptions in the second half killing the chance to make a comeback, or whether it's just these 1, 2, 3 and out, or these yardless drives in the first half, not allowing the Browns to do anything and wearing the hell out of the defense early. I just think that was for sure the bad for this game.
Yeah, I would agree that offensive was, you had every bit of hope, or at least a little bit of hope, that you thought that something would show up this week, and it was horrible. The ugly, we both would agree on this. I think the miscommunication on defense, specifically 2 huge plays.
Yeah. and why we put this as the ugly is because it's pretty ugly for a team to have this big of collapses and trying to, finish a defensive series when it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 21. And a lot of things that have gone wrong on this team have reasons, like, there was a lot of injuries. The quarterback was coming off surgery. There's all this stuff. This is Denzel Ward and Delpit and Thornhill in the same defense they've been in for 2 seasons. And we're talking one of the best cornerbacks in the league having one of the best years of his career, just completely whiffing on 2 plays that gave the Chargers life on the road and 14 real easy points rather than having to give the ball back to the Browns.
Yeah, those miscommunications killed it. Even if the team had some type of hope even though the offense kind of was sputtering there to begin with. Um, those passes were just. I mean, as a fan, as watching it from home, I was like, I don't know, the way this offense is playing, this is not good. Even though the defense was like good, bad, and then like you're like, ugh, stay
It's
consistent, man.
frustrating. Like we always define the ugly as something that's like, just one player, a couple plays, or one player, or just something like just completely that skews the game. And for this, like your defensive line showed up. They were getting pressure on the quarterback. They were able to get to the quarterback several times. You had two linebackers out, and your backup linebackers were holding their own and doing a pretty good job. And then the secondary is working, they're playing, but then you have just like these two plays where a whiff just costs you so much. And the defense is, I think in one of them it was like 3rd and 21. Like your defense has put them in the worst position to try to go forward. And the only way they can get out of this is for you to just completely leave someone uncovered. And it's on a very simple concept of defense that they just lost which zone they were supposed to be in or which player was supposed to take the coverage down the field. And it's just not an acceptable thing on week 9 in a defense that's not new with all veterans on your defense. It's a
Yeah.
joke.
Do you think James Frank on Facebook says, my personal opinion, Ward should have sat out this weekend. He looked confused and not himself at all. Do you think the
Yeah.
concussion has something to do with that? Or
I'm
you
glad he
think,
said that. Yeah, I don't know, but like it immediately gives you pause when you have, like I
yeah,
said, he's a top cornerback in the league. You can debate where he is, top 5. See, I mean, I've heard people say he's in the top 3 with a lot of the categories he's got going on now. I mean, he's obviously a top cornerback. He's a veteran. Thornhill knows what he's doing in this defense. The way he looked so lost and his coverage grade and one of his lowest PFF scores ever, all that stuff combined makes you wonder if, yeah, he passed concussion protocol, but that doesn't mean he was with it and ready to play because he looked totally out of sorts.
yeah. Before we get back into game, we go to game recap. James had the good, bad, and ugly answers. He says the good Cedric Tillman continues on his great gameplay. True, love is trending upwards.
I hope you bought
Even
early in Dynasty.
yeah, even the thing is like what's encouraging for me is like the receivers couldn't seem to be open because the defense seemed to know what plays were being called, which is another
Mhm.
issue. And he
They're
still
just a
was
very
finding,
good defense.
yeah, yeah. That's not something we'll discuss too later. But he was getting open and finding ways to get open to get the ball. So that's what encourages me about
Yeah.
him from last week. Because I was like, oh, you're gonna do that against Baltimore. The pass defense was horrible. But let's see what he does against LA because their pass defense and rush defense were equal to each other. They're one of the
Right.
best defenses in the league as far as being equal pass and rushing. So, and I thought he performed pretty well. He said the bad
And
was Jameis holding.
oh, yeah, go ahead. I forgot it. We had 2
He's,
more to go.
he said the bad was Jameis holding the ball a little too long. We'll talk about that a little later. The ugly,
Yeah.
the secondary. We talked about the secondary giving up big
Pretty much the
plays.
same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, those are easy ones to go with. Let's roll on Tillman since he brought him
yeah,
up and we got into a
yeah,
little detail there already. So
yeah,
I've been pretty skeptical of Tillman. I'm not easy to please. I'm not like a Browns optimist. I don't see them draft somebody and just immediately think like, yeah, I love this guy or this guy's gonna be great. Like I don't buy the hype from Mary Kay writing an article about how he had such a tough time fighting through college, and it makes me think like he must be amazing. Like I'm just not
yeah.
that guy. I just don't like buy into that stuff until like I see signs. And he hasn't had many coming up to now. The one thing I can say from my perspective that actually makes me a pretty confident Tillman believer at this point is he now has 3 games in a row where he played good enough to be a starting X receiver, on a pretty good NFL team, I would think too. Um, 1, he's played with 2 different quarterbacks, so when it comes to, like, it's not just this Flacco magic like with Elijah Moore last year that kinda brought him to life for some games. He played that first good game with, uh with, uh, DTR and Watson mostly.
Yeah.
And then he played that second game with what we would consider the best version of Jameis Winston, like the good Jameis. And then he played this second game with
The
what we would
bad.
consider a pretty shitty Jameis. So it's like
Yeah.
you feel pretty confident when somebody has 3 games in a row, and it's not like, well, he just played 3 games with Mahomes or something, so maybe it's an aberration. It looks like he played against a bad defense, a good defense, with a bad quarterback, with a good quarterback, and just found a way to be a useful starting X receiver in all those positions. And that gives me more faith in him than probably anything statistically or any of the like upselling that media or coaches have done for him
Yeah.
to this point.
I mean, if you're into stats, like since week 7, which is 3 games, 21 receptions on 32 targets, 255 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's an average of 7 receptions, 10.6 targets per game. By the way, his targets have gone up a lot. 85 yards and 1 touchdown per game. He took 76% of the 76 snaps, which is 96% last week. 6 receptions, 11 targets, 75 yards and a touchdown, which that touchdown was probably a gimme because San Diego was playing soft anyways. But either way, you got to count it. He was playing hard. So that's what you can look forward to once they get some freaking consistency.
And he dropped another one. He had the chance to get another one, and he let it go. So that's still something he has to work on, but he was legitimately open for a touchdown again. So if nothing else, he's got to work on his hands, but at least we can all be confident the kid knows how to get open now somehow. I don't know what clicked in his brain, but he has been consistently getting open. And when the end of last year, he couldn't even figure out which route to run.
Yeah.
And he certainly wasn't blocking on rushing downs. So it's a big change for him.
Yeah, I think more or less he dropped because he thought he was going to get popped. So either way, he's just still catch the ball, get popped, and still catch a touchdown. Either way, keep your hands on the ball.
I would say too, one more thing on him from my perspective is because you said between week 7 and 9, and I texted that to a friend because we were kind of talking fantasy, dynasty football, and trying to kind of gauge what do we think he's worth. And he said, well, you can never really take stats from just a 3-week period when somebody does good. And I would agree with that normally. The reason I think this stands out is because those 3 weeks aren't just like we picked his 3 best weeks on purpose. These were the weeks starting when he became the starter after Cooper got traded. And
Good
so
point.
there's no reason to think this isn't the start of his starting career.
Yeah.
From that point. So 7 on is kind of just like if you wanted to learn if the Browns offense is any good, you probably want to take the passing stats from when Jameis started on, not the whole season, because our first quarterback wouldn't let go of the ball. So like it would be realistic to say, what is this Browns offense as far as a passing offense starting week 8 or whatever?
Yeah.
I feel the same way about Tillman.
Yeah. And you know who's probably the happiest person in Berea right now that is Tillman's actually trending up? It will be Andrew Berry. Because he actually can say, look, I got someone right. So on to Jamison Hyde. Well,
it's gonna be my nickname for him going forward.
I love that nickname, Jamison Hyde. He ended with a 3-2 ratio on this horrible.
Oh no, that's my bet. Yeah, sorry. So this is confusing.
Will he?
Somebody texted me. Yeah, somebody messaged me and was like, "Dude, he threw 3 touchdowns last week, and then this week he threw 3 interceptions." And I said, like, his most notable year was that 31 touchdown, 30 interception year. I don't think that's the true him, but I also don't think his like 21 touchdown to whatever 10 interception year is him either. He's going to be one of those people where like I'm expecting at best he's going to throw 3 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. So like,
he might ball out against Saints coming.
Oh, we temporarily lost Angel. So Angel was saying how he might ball out against the Saints. At this point, I think he could have an up game like he had against the Ravens. He could have a down game like the one he had against the Chargers, who it's not an excuse for him. It was a very good defense. And then the Ravens were a very bad passing defense. There's a good chance he could have a lot of games with a mediocre defense where he's just somewhere in the middle, where he throws 3 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, or 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. for me, that is kind of going to be the Jameis Winston we should go forward expecting. And why I think this is interesting and ironic that so many people got so on board from him, and there was such a pushback of like hatred on this interview that Mary Kay Cabot did with uh, the Best Damn Cleveland Sports Show, where basically she just told everybody to temper their expectations a little bit on Jameis, that what he did versus the Ravens is probably not what he's capable of doing for a whole season. And I swear I was in a bunch of conversations. I watched the one after another messages come through on Twitter or Instagram, just bashing her for either being like some kind of Deshaun Watson like honk, or for just being like a downer on on Jameis after that Ravens game. But I got in so many conversations saying like she's not wrong. We actually should temper our expectations. If we're thinking this dude is throwing for 315 yards and 3 touchdowns and no interceptions every week, I mean that that is a nice high to be on for a while, but that was never going to happen. So um, so yeah, it's to everybody who kind of had realistic expectations or told everybody to simmer down and pump the brakes on the Jameis experience. They're probably right, but I also would tell them the exact opposite this week. Don't expect him to pop 3 interceptions every week. That's something he's always been capable of. He did it a lot later in the game when I think he thought he really needed to try to change the game, and that was a lot of pressure on him for a defense that's too good for you to do that against. And I think that's all wound up just leading to a really rough outing for him. So hopefully we get Angel back here. Until then, I'm going to go on with my with the outline for a little bit. He, that was
Whew.
timed pretty well.
Yeah.
So we just finished. I just finished a little Jameis talk. Do you have anything to add? I basically said, you know, that exactly what Mary Kay said about pumping the brakes on his good performance is the same thing I would say. She was right, by the way, but it's the same thing I'd say about this week's performance is pump the brakes on being like, oh, Jameis sucks now. It's over. Like
Yeah. Well,
he
you're,
played great against a bad defense. He played bad
yeah.
against a great defense. Let's just figure he's somewhere in between that.
Yeah, he's going to give you maybe a 500 ball from this point on, which is good. It was what you want. You want to win. You don't want to do DTR because we know who I heard the argument. Well, we need to see what we have in DTR. What have you not seen in DTR? I mean, what you got? What you got? You got what you get, right? So
Every time somebody says that, I just ask them, "What is your expectation for him? Like, what do you think is the best case scenario for him?" And a lot of them are like, "Well, I don't know. I think he probably is a backup." And it's like, if everybody
okay.
agrees to that, then you don't need to see it. He
You
can
want to
stay
see
your
it?
backup.
Yeah,
He's a
yeah.
cheap
So
backup.
I think, well, we're as a podcast, we're on the let's win at all costs phase. So I think James still gives you the chance to win better than DTR or Zappy. So you play Jameis and then you see what he does. I mean, he's going to throw 4 interceptions to, he's going to throw 5, 6
Unfortunately.
touchdowns. I mean, he's going to have good games. He's going to have you coming back thinking that you're going to still be a great quarterback next year, but you get what you got. That's why he's a backup.
So what do we what does he have now? 4 interceptions to 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Is that right? 4-3.
Yeah, I believe so. I'll look it up real
Yeah.
quick.
Mike's confirming that's 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. So I'm guessing that at best he's going to end the season with a 3-2 touchdown ratio. Right now he's below that,
And
but
that's what
I
his,
think
I
that's
think that's what his numbers are lifetime. I think he throws
yeah.
that anyway.
I mean, if he's
So
going to put up 18 touchdowns, I'm going to expect he's going to put up like 15 interceptions. Like I think
easy.
that's
Yeah.
just what you got.
And by the
So
way, you
it's still
got,
more fun.
yeah, you got that out of Baker. Baker's currently doing that right now. I mean, so if you're saying quit Jameis, but at the same time you're saying we should have kept Baker, they're kind of the same thing, even though Baker's may be a little better. But either way, no, I agree. Yeah, let's keep Jameis in there. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Jameis is Jameis. Just enjoy the season. Let's hope another
Yeah.
2-3 wins. By that way, we're not like the suckiest team in the league. But I agree. Temper your expectations.
Yep.
Next, This defense was a top 4 defense per PFF in 2024. Now, what has happened to this defense? Because it's inconsistent at best.
Yeah. So we just played the Chargers. They are a top defense. We used
Yes.
to have a top defense. I feel like watching that game and watching like Khalil Mack get around the edge, watching them able to shut us down for the entire first half and then get a bunch of turnovers once they were playing from head in the second half. Like I miss that vibe of our defense. And the sad news is, although we have some injuries, we've been that kind of a defense even with some injuries. So it's a pretty big drop. And during the bye week episode, we're going to have some segments on what do we do going forward. Nobody's going to want to hear it, but I'm going to bring up questions about essentially our defense and our defensive coordinator. So we won't get too into that now, but heads up for the bye week episode because I'm ready to start questioning. I'm ready to start questioning like the untouchables of Cleveland because while everybody wants to blow up on Stefanski, I don't know why. Dorsey, I kind of get. Barry, mostly based on Watson, and just a bad feeling of where we're at right now this season. I think I haven't heard jack about Schwartz, and I just think this defense, like they came in, I feel like believe in their own press clippings from last year, and they took a hefty step back in terms of consistent gameplay.
Yeah.
And now on both sides of the ball, we can't seem to put like a game together. We've had trouble with the defensive line really getting to the quarterback. This week they did, and the secondary completely blew it. There's been weeks where we've kind of shut down the passing game, and teams with mediocre running backs like Singletary run over us, and we can't get the tackle. That guy, by the way, on a terrible team, just got basically benched and is now the second stringer. And if you looked at his performance against us, you would think he'd be closer to an MVP.
Yeah.
So
basically, that is the sound of the season. But yeah, I agree.
We
like,
are
horrible. What's weird is like, I think, I'm not saying this because the Saints are a horrible team. I think they're going to come out against the Saints and play like top. I think if you were to put any team other than the Saints, it seems like whenever they have a bad game,
is that a Jameis revenge game?
Well, maybe, but I'm thinking like whenever the defense has a bad game, they come out the next game wanting to prove that they're good. So now that they're good, now they're like, "Oh, I told you we're good." The next game they suck because again they believe that they're good instead of just being.
You're saying we have the Baker Mayfield. You're saying we have the Baker Mayfield
of defenses.
You guys have seen. I know we've talked about the circle of Baker Mayfield, like the Baker Mayfield cycle, where it's like Baker Mayfield, like balls out, feels really confident, loses
4 picks.
a big game. Yeah, 3 picks, loses a big game. Like the press goes crazy and all the headlines, and Baker has to cancel out the doubters and comes out and wins a big game. You're like, oh.
And then you're like, oh, guys, a vicious cycle of, and that's how I feel like the defense is. It's like, do they suck? No, they're good. No, look how good they are. No, they suck again. So it's like, be consistent. So we can really gauge and what it is. Maybe they missed JOK last week, but it doesn't excuse the fact that you had 2 huge missed plays downfield. That doesn't make sense. Like that's the type of stuff that Joe Woods would have done. Like Joe Woods was like,
that's what it looked like.
Expected.
Those were games where like a giant miscommunication comes up. There's somebody wide open, and it's not that frustrating for like a play to happen like that. It happens in football. Like the frustrating part is not only did it happen twice, but it happened twice on third downs where you could have gotten the ball back, and you're like, and that changes the game that early where you just put them in a spot on the road where the crowd is silent, people are frustrated, and now they're playing feeling great, and you're the team who's kind of feels like they're on the ropes.
Yeah, I mean it's sad to see. Next game topic. Is it time to accept that this year is over now for our contending? But maybe we should be evaluating for the future. Yes.
What do you think? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I agree.
I
I
mean, I know
agree.
we're I know as a podcast, we are on
We're
the side of,
kind of
like,
yeah.
still try to win, but I had a lot of people last year after our last show saying, like, "Hey, we still could win, like, not 9 out of the next 10 and go to the playoffs," and it was like, "Guys, the
Where have
reason
you
they say it's
seen
a 2% chance at getting to the playoffs is because it's not gonna happen." Like, it's just mathematically possible, but it's impossible given what we're seeing out there. And like we know Jameis is probably not a 9 out of 10 type of quarterback. So like I think is this time for like everybody out there who is like still this weird optimistic, like we won a game. Now we can go out there and show the world, like do something incredible. Like, no,
No.
probably not. So, but is winning still important? Yeah. So I think for everybody's like, I guess we can just tank now. Like, that's also not what you want to do. You want to keep a winning culture. You want to look at this season as like now we are in the second half of the season. This is our new like season is this season. What can we do now that we can carry forward with us into the future? And for the
It,
players, they're playing to either keep their spot on this roster or for a big free agency deal next year if they're coming off the books.
yeah, and you want to see as a fan, I want to see players who are young grow and still be competing. If you're sitting there saying throw the flag, the season's over, they're not going to put in effort. Where do you think Tillman was so running so hard to the end of the game? Because he's putting in effort because he's giving 100%. You don't want to fan your players to think, hey, we're going to tank the rest of the season because we want to get a quarterback from that we don't even know is going to work out. And by the way, most quarterbacks that end up going high don't work out anyway. So it's like, come on, like it's a vicious cycle of sucking to get a quarterback, and if he doesn't suck, then you blame the organization for sucking to get the quarterback you wanted. It's like a vicious cycle of victim blaming here. Let's just play the game the way it needs to be played by winning or try to win. If you don't, great, but at least you try, right? Keep it competitive, and then just let the dominoes fall where they fall. Where you land in the draft is where you land in the draft, and then you figure it out from there. And the main reason why people want to suck so bad is because they want a high pick for a quarterback, right? And we talked about this a couple of times, and maybe we'll talk about it next week too.
I get that.
Like Patrick Mahomes, was he the first quarterback picked in that draft? No. Was Jackson the first quarterback picked in that draft? No. You picking first and getting the first quarterback doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best quarterback of the draft. So you can't bake on that. So you're going to kill your culture in hopes to get a good quarterback. If he doesn't work out, you kill your culture, and you're going to kill a quarterback that you shouldn't even picked anyways.
Okay, so two things because I was looking at the standings because I totally agree with that point, but my piggyback point off that would be right now the Browns have 2 wins. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,
Six.
8, 9 other teams that also have 2 wins,
I think we're
and there
picking
are 2
fifth.
teams. Yeah, we're picking 5th based on, like, current
Yeah.
tiebreakers, but the idea is there's what, 9 teams that have 2 picks, so if the way that this season plays out and then there's 2 teams that have 3 wins right now. So the way this season plays out is we're in a mix of about 11 other teams. So,
Exactly.
like so this, like, whole, like, "Oh, maybe we can try to get Cam Ward with the first pick," like, you guys might end up picking we might end up picking a 8th, 11th, like, who knows? And even if you're trying to lose, which I get why a GM or an organization would do that, a coach and the players out there aren't, and even with the schedule we have coming up, there's a chance that if things landed the way they are right now today, we're picking 6th. So that's just a thing where it's like, okay, and if a quarterback falls to 6th, great. And but trying to get there on purpose, knowing that the situation you're in with the players on your team, like it's just not a feasible thing to be thinking tank. It's a feasible thing to be thinking, okay, we're probably a bottom 10 team and we're going to end up somewhere in that bottom 10 mix. How can we get some positives out of that so that whatever quarterback or whoever we pick there, we can continue go right back into a winning season and winning culture and not this whole blow up, start over, get new coaches, get new GMs, get all new players that comes with those moves, and then hope they're all the right ones that make us a
Yeah.
winner again like we were. It's much more feasible to me to think we can retool things and get back to what we were last year than to blow it up and get back to where we were last year. So
I agree. And also James Frank on Facebook brings up a good point. He says we need some offensive linemen. Batonio's not going to be here with us much longer, which is true. You can't you have to
I think they drafted his replacement this year, and I know he's stunk so far, but I do think that they knew already Batonio was not long for this team, and they picked Zach Zinter, I think, in the
yeah.
third round to eventually step in that spot.
Yeah, and to his point, like you're eventually going to need more offensive linemen. Then you're going to need to get to the point where you need to. Miles is getting a little older, so you might have to draft his replace. I mean, there's so many more things you need to think of outside of just quarterback. Though the quarterback's important, I have to believe that you can just put a good under center quarterback who can just not make mistakes under Kevin's system, and he's going to do you wonders as opposed to drafting a number one guy anyways. So now if you can draft a number one guy, great, but I don't think you force it. I agree 100%. Next topic. Okay, we're gonna go into the news. Breaking news that happened throughout today. Obviously, the trades. You got Za'Darius Smith for seventh. Za'Darius Smith for a seventh and fifth. Sorry. How did you write that? Say it again.
We gave up Za'Darius Smith.
Oh yeah, and a seventh for a fifth and a sixth. Did you like that trade?
Me? No, I didn't want to make that trade. I've been pretty clear about that. I get why they made the trade. I kind of get what they're thinking. Za'Darius Smith is older, and assuming Andrew Berry keeps his position, he really finds late round draft picks to be pretty valuable. For me, I think Za'Darius Smith, brings kind of a veteran presence to this team. I think if by chance, I don't know, Garrett has a high ankle sprain and has to miss a month of football, Za'Darius Smith is good enough to swing to that side and take over as your lead pass rusher. Nobody in football wants to think about depth. I had all these people telling me like we should trade Wills now that
I saw that too.
Jones is a starter, and I'm like, so you have an injury laden Conklin on the right. You've got DeJuan Jones who has missed games this year and last year on the left, and then you don't want any backup tackle because James Hudson III is already on IR. So like the way we as Browns fans think of it is like, well, because we're not going to the playoffs this year, it doesn't matter what happens. And for those guys out there, like you've got Nick Chubb back there. Everybody pretends like they love Nick Chubb so much, and then they want to wash the offensive line and trade a bunch of guys. You really want Jones to go out with a concussion and there to be zero tackles to try to block for Jameis Winston and Nick Chubb just to get crushed in a crowded backfield every play. Like, come on, guys. Think about the whole team and what everyone needs in order to move forward on this team. So I didn't want to trade Smith only because if it was on the last year of his deal, absolutely, I would have been like, get what you can for him. He's not getting you anywhere this year. But we have young guys on the team that could still learn from him. He's going to be on the team next year. And if my whole vision of like, well, let's get into the offseason, get everyone healthy, try to come back with a better plan next year and a stronger start, I think he's a pretty valuable piece to have on this team next year too. And if I understand it correctly, you're also going to take a little bit of a cap hit for moving him on before the end of this season. And with all that combined was why I was skeptical of making the move unless you were going to get something like a fourth or something I would have never expected to actually get.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you're saying 100%. But I think from to counter that, I think what Barry saw was picks. And he said, I need talent because I spent too much money on the position and I'm going to have to come with some talent. So I think he saw more picks, and I think eventually he's going to package those picks and get more talent out of it. No, I agree. I think they should have kept him. This podcast in general, we will maybe get Mike's point of view later, but this podcast in general is all about winning at all costs. And obviously, if you get rid of Smith, you lose a huge talent there, unless they have a plan. I don't know who Alex
Yeah.
Wright is hurt, so he would
I
have
mean,
been
this
his
isn't so
replacement.
far. Yeah, it's a shame that it's a shame that Alex Wright is hurt because this
Yeah,
would be his chance. He had a pretty good start to the season. This would be his chance to step in. Isaiah McGuire, on the other hand, who got picked this year, has been just an absolute beast and has even outplayed Alex Wright. So I can see them saying like,
yeah,
okay, it's time for Isaiah McGuire, who's actually been outplaying Za'Darius Smith in more limited snaps, to get out there and get his time as a starter on the other side of Garrett. And then you still have Agbo Okoronkwo, who would be your third rotational piece. And then there's even guys like Kamara, who can actually slide out to the outside a little bit on this team. So I get that, like a Mari Cooper-esque type of like, okay, we've got a second year guy who's playing well in there. We've got another free agent we picked up who's younger, who we'd like to see getting more snaps out there. And our future is really Garrett, McGuire, and Alex Wright. So maybe they were going to cut him next year anyway, and that they were looking at it not like me as a 2-year deal, but more as like this is
like this
probably a
is
1-year
it.
deal.
Yeah, and we could get picks out of him now
So
as
that I
opposed
get,
to
and
not.
they got a fair deal. I wanted more, but how much are you gonna get for a 32-year-old
Yeah,
halfway
that's
through the
yeah.
season?
I saw someone comment. I posted something on Facebook, and someone commented like, "Oh, they only got a fifth." I'm like, "What did you think?" This is the question. I said, What would you think you would have gotten
Exactly.
for him?"
You
And they're
ask
like,
them, "Yeah, what do you think?"
what I would have. What are you going to get for a fifth round pick? And this is why I said, "Do you like Jerome Ford?" Oh yeah, Jerome Ford's
Right.
great. I'm like, well, he was a fifth round pick.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we solved that problem. So you didn't tell me.
Yeah, and
Uh,
Barry, and to be fair, Barry has had better luck than people we've had in the past, and a lot of GMs, at finding talent late in the draft. I'm still not a big believer in the numbers that you can consistently get talent back there, but if somebody is going to, he probably is. And for
he's gonna.
everybody out there that hates him, bad news. If they were making these trades and they were letting him run the trade block this weekend,
He's staying.
he's probably locked in. Yeah, they're probably
He's
not
staying.
making these trades
Sorry.
if he's, they would have let the next GM decide what to do with this roster if he was going. So, barring
And
something really unexpected, he's
and
probably here.
that's a good thing. I listen. Sometimes you have to go through failures and learn from it, and hopefully learn from it to grow. Right. The biggest thing this fan base does, as soon as someone gets something wrong, get rid of everybody. Let's start over, and then we're redoing everything every
Right.
2 to 3 years. It's so annoying. One
I
comment
think we're
here.
just used to that. I think
Yeah.
we're just
No.
used to it.
Yeah. It's like a weird like abuse. It's like a I don't know term, but it's like a pattern of just
A
I
cycle of
like
abuse.
yeah, cycle of abuse. It's weird. Kim McDonald, Dogs Podcast, he commented. He said, "Hey lads, great seeing you this weekend." He was at the Berea Browns backers. Me and Mike went to. We'll talk about that later. He said, "I hate blowing it up mentally. Every team in our division figures out how to win games to get better, and we need to try and we try to lose to get better." Which good point, doesn't make sense. I don't know if
I
Saunders
agree. You
kid.
can lose to get better if you have no direction, nothing on the team going right, and you just know you have to completely start over. They have a coach they're probably going to keep, and we've seen enough out of him that everybody on this podcast thinks, okay, this guy can coach. We have a GM who has some ups and downs. He made a giant miss so far on that quarterback trade, and that is what haunts him. But in the draft, with the limited picks he's had because of that quarterback trade, he has still found a way to find talent. So there's a reason to believe, like, okay, he's not a total dope. He just took a risk and he swung and he missed big. But but this team has had a consistent direction over the Stefanski era of playing through the whistle as far as like season wise and just not being a team that's just going to get stomped on that looks listless, that looks directionless. So I don't want to turn them back into that. I'd rather them take the Steelers model of, okay, this isn't a good year. Let's win as much as we can and then we will figure out the future than like let's drop these guys, can it, and just start over because I just think that
It's just
only the bad teams do that, I guess.
yes, and that's what you're stuck in horrible purgatory where it's just like, okay, you're starting to set up something, and because they had one bad year, we're just going to wipe the slate clean. Just for you give somebody 2 to 3 years to mess up once, and then you wipe the slate clean. It's like, come on,
And let's be honest, if there's a time to do that, it's in 2 years when Deshaun Watson's contract's over. It's not
exactly
now.
valid point. Do you want to do in 2 years when Watson contract is on, and then you can bring a new guy, new team in to reevaluate talent, get your quarterback, and start all over from scratch? You don't want somebody to step into this match. Yeah, exactly. Second point. On to our next topic. Steelers got Mike Williams from the Jets. Did they improve?
I mean, I don't think he's having a tremendous year, but I would say if he can get out there and stay out there consistently, he gives them a second or a second receiver that a cornerback actually has to cover. I mean, before this, it was like double Pickens, and they have nothing that they can do offensively except for run the ball. And so, like, I don't think this moves the needle, and it's only for the rest of this year. They're still in contention, so they're going to try to
Yeah.
go for it. But it's kind of a bummer that they did this before they played the Browns the both times, because I would have loved to just play them with them having so few options.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on the take that I think Pittsburgh's probably the best team in the division. I've said that actually since week one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I said that since week one when I saw that defense play Atlanta, and I said even if they get average quarterback play, they're going to be stellar, and they have been actually. They actually got another edge rusher too in the free
From Green Bay.
the trade thing.
Right,
So
and
I
it gives
think
them
they're
a
going to be dangerous.
rotation. It gives them a rotation if Watt or I'm blank. What's his name? The other side edge.
Hightower.
Hightower miss any
Yeah.
time, but it also gives them depth. It gives them the ability to rotate, and actually, it was a player that I thought was playing pretty well and still has like another year in his contract for Green Bay. So good on them to make a move. It's a bummer for us rooting for them not to do very well. But again, I don't think this is a giant moves the needle move. I think this was just like, well, we're in it, and these are cheap moves. Let's try it.
Yeah. Joe Burrow threw for 5 touchdowns. Should have rested last week. Should have rested the NFL be nervous.
Um,
They're trending.
if it's me, I'm saying no, only because I think Joe Burrow has the capability of throwing for 3 to 4 touchdowns every week, and their defense can't
It
figure out
sucks.
what the heck to do to stop the other team from
Yeah.
doing it.
So
So
that's
it's
why
very much like
I thought for sure they would be on the prowl for some defensive help, and I didn't see anything on the trade
yeah,
market.
they pulled in a running back, but
Yeah, because their other
with
guy they
Zach
got
Moss
hurt.
being banged up.
Yeah. Yeah, I
But
thought
again,
for
that
sure.
helps their offense, but I don't think their offense is the big problem. Like, they can put up
Yeah.
points. The fact that they can't stop anybody is what's going to keep them out of the playoffs. And right now, the difference between us and them, if you're really looking at it, is not that huge as
Consistency.
far as talent. It's the difference is they have Joe Burrow and we do not.
Yeah.
So their fans are
That's
like,
true.
we don't need to tank. We don't need the first pick in the draft. We don't need a new
You
quarterback.
might.
They're feeling like wherever we pick, let's just get someone talented and let's, take this team. They're thinking immediately, like, let's not tear it down, even though they're in almost as bad a shape as us. Their fans are thinking, well, since we have Joe Burrow, we believe in where this team is going. So next year we want to keep winning and do whatever we can to stay in it. They're not so worried about getting a top draft pick because they know they'll finish with someone who can help them get back to the last year's version of the Bengals.
Who the Bengals miss is I was actually looking up his name because it slipped my mind, is Jesse Bates, who they let go in free agency, who went to Atlanta, who's helping their defense win, by the way, because they can't afford to pay anybody because now they have to pay the receivers. But I'm with you on that. I think that the reason why I'm not too scared about that is because of the defense, which brings me to my next point. It only took Derrick Henry 9 games to rush for over 1,000 yards. Are the Ravens the best team in the AFC North?
This guy has to get tested
Old.
for steroids after every single game, because how the hell does somebody, whatever he is, 30 years old, continue to not only like put up numbers and be productive, he is just dominant, and he does not look at all like he missed a
Slowing.
step. I remember a point where him and Nick Chubb, where I was looking at the two of those guys and thinking, I mean, these are the same guy. And then since then, Nick Chubb's had a couple injuries. Then he had that terrible knee injury, and now he's trying to work his way back. But like Derrick Henry is older than him, has way more miles on put on the tires, and is just feels invincible. Like
Yeah.
what is that guy? What is that guy doing in his life that he is just came into the league like mid, and then somewhere around like his second end of his second year, he just blew up, and he has never slowed down at all.
It's
I've
insane how he can just stay consistent. And he really hasn't had
It's
any
every
major
year.
he hasn't had any major injuries either. That's even more
Every year we
amazing.
come into the season with people saying like, "Well, Derrick Henry's great, but he's getting a little old."
He's got a lot of it's kind of a lot of miles on those wheels, and then he was just like, "See, I told you, I got nothing. I'm nothing." But do you think they're the best team in the North?
I still do think they're better than the Steelers because they have Lamar. My worry for them is the same worry I always have. If Lamar has one bad game in the playoffs, can they survive? For the first time, they must feel like, well, we have Derrick Henry who can kind of carry this team if he needed to. They also traded for Deontay Johnson, so they have a better setup. I get your point on the Steelers, and I could easily believe that through like their culture and just that grittiness of them and the way that they now have a quarterback who's experienced in the playoffs, they could be a big playoff threat, but it's just hard to bet against Lamar and Derek, even when their defense is so blah.
Bad. See, that's why I don't. This is why I give the edge a little bit to Pittsburgh, is because of that Ravens defense. Now they did trade for a corner today from the Rams, White, so that might help them.
Decent
But
player.
yeah, decent player. But their defense, it's not as good as it was last week. Don't let that fool you. Their defense is bottom of the league, and I think they can score 40, but if you can score 41 in that defense, you're going to win every time. Obviously, because it's math, basic math here, Angel. So that's what makes me put a little edge over Pittsburgh. It's going to be great seeing them go head to head. Actually, the head to head will determine. I think whoever wins the head to head, obviously, it's going to determine the division there. And it's just surprising because we went there thinking Pittsburgh, they're going to have some. Not what this podcast was like. Don't sleep on Pittsburgh. A lot of people are
we
like,
were very pumped to
Pittsburgh.
break. Everybody
Everybody else was
laughed.
like,
I was
Pittsburgh's
like, I
suck.
don't know, man.
Like I had a
think
couple of friends I talked trash to with Pittsburgh, like I always do every year. Even though I knew they were going to be good, even when they had Ben, I still talked trash. But we knew better.
I picked the Bengals to be last in this division, even though I picked us to be third.
Yeah, third. Yeah. Actually, we all got that wrong because you did 9. I think I did 10, 11 wins, and same with Mike, 10, 11. And
I just knew this wasn't a double-digit team with the way Watson was starting. It was mostly 2, and I think I had 10 like on our first prediction ever.
Yeah.
But then when it got to the season, I was debating. Like I think I posted on my page that they'd win between 8 and 9, but my final prediction was 9, and it was mostly just like I had higher expectations for earlier in the season, and that obviously got crushed. But when you come into the season with several starting linemen hurt, your quarterback coming off surgery, so many guys missing camp, a bunch of guys just getting activated onto the roster like the week of the first game, like I just knew it was going to be chaos to begin with. I just hoped they could hang on enough to sneak like 2 of those first 4 games, and first 2 or 3 of those first 5 games, and they couldn't. They got 1.
So. It's been, they're not even going to get to 5, maybe 5 wins this year, which is we were way. I was
so
way
tough
off.
to tell.
Definitely, it's hard.
Yeah, it's
horrible.
so tough to tell.
Now let's close the show. We're gonna hit up some Cleveland sports headlines, some local stuff going on here. How about those Cavs, baby? 8-0 for the first time since 1976, and they have an opportunity to go 9-0 this week when they go up against the New Orleans Pelicans. What do you think about those Cavs?
If you guys are not watching the Cavs, I feel the exact same way as when I scolded everybody for not getting on board with the Guardians early in that season. Look. So when I wrote this, it was actually Cavs started 7-0 for the first time since 1976. And then they went
They
on
were
and beat the Bucks a second time in 3
back to
days, meaning
back.
that they have beaten one of the best teams in the East twice already, back to back. They've beaten another top team in the Knicks. They beat LeBron in kind of a homecoming with his son game. That is the type of game that LeBron just magically wins. Like, this team has got something, guys. Like,
There's
they still have some of the defensive principles from last year and the toughness, and they have so much better camaraderie and offensive ability this year. It is so fun to watch.
what's exciting is it doesn't you don't know who's going to go off. It could be Mitchell, it could be Mobley, it can be
They can play matchups now. They can
yeah,
actually say
yeah,
like, "Oh, this team is really weak underneath. Let's just feed Jared
just
Allen
speed.
and Mobley."
Yeah.
And if the team it lets it go around the perimeter, they are leading the league with like 44% or something, 40 something percent 3-point percentage. And I just think like shout out to all of the people that gave me so much grief for saying it was okay for the
Atkins.
Cavs to keep this core in place and just change the coach. And before you made any rash moves on trading core pieces, let's see if the coaching change made a difference. And so many people were like,
Huge difference.
fire the
Yeah.
GM for not
Typical
trading
Cleveland.
Garland or for not, trading Allen and making a change. Like it's sometimes it is in the coaching, especially when you have a team this young and you've seen it. We've seen Garland better than last year. We've seen Mobley coming as a good player. Like all of these guys have something that you think if we can just tap this offensively, they're already defensively. We're a top team last year. Like you can really get it done. And it's exactly what they're proving so far.
Yes, yes, I agree. On to those Guardians, Jimenez and Quan won the Golden Glove. I was like, Golden Globe is what I was going to say. Won the Golden Glove Award for the third straight year. What is up with those guys? Those
Dude, Jimenez
gloves?
is a platinum glover, right? I mean, these
Yeah,
and Quan, you got to be so like proud of Quan. I love watching that kid, whether he's out in the field, the way he knows how to constantly make contact at the plate. Like he is one of my favorite players on this team, and it's so easy to love like Big Christmas, and it's so easy to look at Ramirez and feel like, oh, this guy is just a bomber and obviously one of the best players in the whole league. But Quan is just a lovable dude, man. He's like a smallish guy. He's got a great attitude. He's just does something unique in the league with his ability to constantly put the ball in play. And it is like I'm just so happy for those guys. Um, and
yeah,
it's fun to have a team with so many fun, lovable, like just a likable team, likable coach. Like it's a cool experience to have that with the Cavs and with the
the
guards. And
guards.
I can't wait till we get back to it with the Browns again, where it's just
Yeah,
like I like this team. I like these guys.
yeah, they got some decisions to make with Naylor coming up, whether they're going to sign him or not. But I think they might have to, considering Fry. By the way, did you hear David Fry hit your grand slams with a broken elbow? He had
No, I didn't hear
surgery.
that.
Yeah, he had surgery on his elbow today, so he's going to be out for 6 months. But he was
Oh my
playing
gosh.
through it, so that adds to the lore, the legacy, or the
Incredible. So
legendary.
that's gotta be like a contact fracture, right? Like the
Yeah,
something hit him and he chipped it or something?
yeah, they didn't
How do you
say, but they announced it on the
gotta
radio
be.
today, and it was pretty shocking. So I look for
Wow.
them probably to sign Naylor because they're definitely going to need him. On to the last, but the Buckeyes win big in Happy Valley, 20-13. And this news that just dropped, I just got it. Let's see if you know. Mike can't say anything because he can't talk. The CFP rankings have just dropped. Who is number one? The college playoff ranking. Sorry.
Oregon. Is it gonna be Oregon?
Correct. Who is number two?
It's not is it us?
Yes. Ohio State comes in at
Ah,
number
yes.
two. Yeah,
I thought it
switch
was still
odds.
going to be Georgia.
I agree. I thought it was gonna be. I actually thought we would be four or five, but you got Oregon, Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee,
Yeah.
Indiana, BYU, Notre
Yep.
Dame, Alabama, and Boise State. That's your top 12.
Yeah, and honestly, that's a pretty good group.
Yeah.
When you look towards the end, when you're seeing Alabama, so BYU, obviously a lot of people aren't going to be a believer, but they're having an incredible year, at least
Yeah.
on paper, on the field. We'll see if they can compete with
I'm
these teams.
kind of shocked that Indiana is not in there, but I think they can.
They're close.
Yeah.
I think it will matter so much how well they play the Buckeyes in whatever that is, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it's awesome because Georgia also played a really tough game against Florida and came out on top. And I think the difference between those games were just seeing what Ohio State did, so closely competitive with Oregon, and then being able to win in Penn State, both of those on the road. I think it's a pretty fair argument to give them the jump and put them 2.
Yeah.
But Georgia is still a force to be reckoned with. We watch them really closely because that's where Katie went to school, and then looking at the other group, like up there, like Texas, like these are tough teams, and
This is
it's
going to be a fun
year for that
Yeah.
12-game playoff.
That's going to be real fun.
There's a lot of good teams.
Yeah, good move on them to do that. They're going to make a lot more money on that too. Well, that is it. That is all we have for you today on the show. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow on all our social media platforms. Follow our lives, YouTube, X, Facebook, whatever. Follow us. Shout out to our sponsors, CB Excavating and Doug White, Allstate Insurance. Thank you for sponsoring the show. Next week, bye-week episode talk, PFF scores. We're going to talk roster recap. All right, have any coaches been fired? Hopefully not. And anything else that trickles through the trading deadline, which I doubt because it's over. If we survive,
for you guys too, everybody out there that's still watching, like if you want a show to participate in, next week would be a pretty big one because without a team to recap, it'll be great to get some of your guys' feedback on there. And when we talk about things like, we assume no coach will be fired by then, but that's when we're going to be talking about, who will be fired if we had to fire someone, whose fault is this, and who's really actually kind of still doing their job. So it's going to be a really fun one for people to kind of be able to jump in and give some more global opinions on this franchise right now.
Yep, that's it. That's all we have for you today. Until next time, like always, go Browns.